Before beginning the story, I'd like to say a big thank you for visiting my new channel. I'm going to be uploading alternate history-related stories every single day. If that sounds good, be sure to leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. It means a whole lot when just getting started. I hope you enjoy the story. I met Delia on a Tuesday afternoon in the fastener aisle of a hardware store on Grover Street. I was there for wire connectors, and she was there for the wrong kind of screw anchor. And I know it was the wrong kind because she was reading the back of the packaging with the focused expression of someone trying to will the information into making sense. I told her what she actually needed. She thanked me without looking up, put the wrong package back, and found the right one. That was it. We were in the parking lot at the same time afterward, and she asked if I wanted coffee. The way some people ask questions they've already decided the answer to. We got coffee, then dinner 2 days later, then a few more dinners after that. It was easy in the way that some things are easy when the timing is right and neither person is trying too hard. She was a landscape architect. She was funny in a dry, quiet way that took some getting used to and then became the thing I looked forward to most. After about 3 weeks, I thought this might go somewhere real. That was 5 weeks ago. I'm telling you the timeline precisely because the timeline is the whole point. I work residential electrical. Early starts, long days. The kind of job where you're usually in someone's house before they've finished their first cup of coffee and gone before they get home for dinner. I got back to my apartment on a Wednesday evening, about 6 weeks after that hardware store parking lot, and Delia was in my kitchen making dinner. Not in a she has a key and drop by way, in a this is her kitchen way. There were things on the counter I didn't recognize. A specific olive oil she apparently preferred. A small ceramic dish near the stove that held rubber bands and spare change. A photograph on the refrigerator that I had not put there. The two of us at what looked like a coastal dinner somewhere. Both of us tanned and relaxed and laughing at something off camera. She looked up when I came in and smiled the way you smile at someone you've been expecting. I went ahead and started, she said. You sounded tired on the phone. I hadn't spoken to her on the phone. I hadn't spoken to her in 3 days. I stood in the doorway of my own kitchen and looked at the photograph on the refrigerator and said carefully that I didn't remember the picture being there. She laughed a little and said I'd complained about that photo for years, that I thought my expression was terrible in it, and that she'd kept it up specifically for that reason. She said it with 10 years of affection behind it, light and certain, and then she turned back to the stove. I sat down at the kitchen table and tried to think clearly. I didn't push it that first night. I know that sounds strange, but the situation had a gravity to it that made confrontation feel premature. She was so settled, so warm, so entirely at ease in the apartment that I'd lived in alone for 4 years, and some part of me was trying to find an explanation that didn't require the conversation I could feel coming. I slept on the couch. She didn't comment on it in the morning. Over the next few days, I started moving carefully through the edges of what she seemed to believe. I asked questions sideways, framed as reminiscing, and she answered them with a consistency and specificity that I couldn't shake. She knew the name of every apartment I'd lived in since we met. She knew about a work injury I'd had 3 years ago that I definitely hadn't mentioned to her. She described a version of our relationship that had texture and history. and the particular wear of something that had been through difficulty and come out intact on the other side. She mentioned a miscarriage. She mentioned it quietly, not as a centerpiece, just as a thing that had happened and that they had moved through together. She said it the way you mention something that left a permanent watermark on a period of your life. I hadn't known about that. I couldn't have. We'd known each other a month. But I sat there and took it in like a man who had been there, because I didn't know what else to do. The people around me remembered her too. That was the part that started to press in on me from all sides. My co-worker Stanton, who I'd worked alongside for 6 years and who knew my life probably better than anyone, asked me how Delia was doing when I ran into him at a supply yard. Casually, the way you ask about someone's wife because she's been their wife for as long as you've known them. My neighbor across the hall, a retired teacher named Bev, who kept an eye on things and had a long memory for everything in the building, stopped me one morning to say she'd seen Delia's car in the lot and was glad she was staying over more often. She said it with the comfortable approval of someone who had watched a couple settle into a good patch after some harder ones. My own mother, when I called her that weekend, asked if Delia was coming to Thanksgiving. She said Delia's name the way she said the names of people she'd grown fond of over years. She asked me to pass along her love. I had never mentioned Delia to my mother. We'd been on 4 dates. There was nothing to mention yet. I got off the phone and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I want to be clear about something. Delia was not performing. Whatever she'd done to the memories of the people around me, she hadn't done it to mine. And so I was watching her from a position she didn't know I had. And from that position, I can tell you that she was not acting. She laughed at things because they were funny to her. She reached for my hand at the kitchen table because it was a habit built over a long time. She talked about the future the way people talk about the future when they feel stable enough to believe in it. When she was tired in the specific way of someone completely at home, and when she was happy, there was nothing behind it but the happiness itself. She was a woman who loved her husband. That was the plain, clear thing underneath everything else. I was just not sure I was the right husband. On a Sunday morning, about 2 weeks after she appeared in my kitchen, I made coffee and put 2 cups on the table and sat down and waited for her to come out of the bedroom. She came out in the way she came out on weekend mornings, unhurried, hair loose. She sat down across from me. She looked at my face, and I watched her read it, the way people who know you very well can read your face before you've said anything. She picked up her coffee and held it in both hands and waited. I asked her to tell me the truth. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't perform confusion. She sat with it for a moment, looking down at the table, and then she looked up at me and started talking. In her world, we'd met 8 years ago at a job site overlap, a house where she was doing the landscaping and I was finishing the electrical. She said we'd argued about scheduling 3 separate times before she finally asked me to dinner as a way of ending the argument, and that I had said yes before she'd finished asking. She told me about the apartment we'd rented together before this one, a smaller place across town with a broken radiator that made noise all winter. She told me about the trip to the coast in the photograph on the refrigerator. She told me about the miscarriage and the year after it, and what that year had asked of both of them, and how they'd come through to the other side of it, changed but still together. She told me about the morning I died. She said it plainly, no softening, no building to it. She said I had died 8 months ago, suddenly, in the way that doesn't offer any preparation or any particular reason. She said the 8 months after it were the worst of her life in a way she didn't have better language for than that. She said she tried to stay. She tried to stay in the world, in the apartment they'd shared, in the routines that had been built for 2 people. She couldn't. She said she found the way across by accident, the way she said most people probably found it, by wanting something badly enough, for long enough, that the wanting made a door. She said she didn't come here with a plan. She didn't come here to deceive me or to build something false. She came because she couldn't be in a world where I wasn't, and this was a world where I was, and she'd told herself she would just be near me for a while. She looked at me when she said that last part. She didn't look away. I asked her about the memories, about Stanton, about Bev, about my mother. She said she hadn't done that deliberately. She said she thought it was something that happened when you crossed over and stayed, that your presence filled in around you the way water filled a shape, that the people nearby adjusted without knowing they were adjusting. She said she hadn't known it would reach as far as it did. I believed her. I'd been believing her for 2 weeks from a position she didn't know I had, and I'd gotten good at knowing when the belief was earned. I asked her what she wanted to happen now. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said she wanted to stay. She said it knowing it wasn't fair, knowing it wasn't something she had the right to want, but that she was done pretending she wanted something more reasonable. I sat with that, with the weight of it, with the 10 years of a life I hadn't lived that she was carrying in her face right now, visible in the set of her mouth, and the way she held the coffee cup, and the specific kind of tired that comes from a grief that hasn't finished yet. I thought about the photograph on the refrigerator, about the man in it who looked easy in his own skin, laughing at something I'd never know, tanned from a trip I hadn't taken. That man was me, and he was not me at all. I told her she had to go. She nodded. She'd been nodding slightly before I said it, the way she'd been reading my face all morning. She didn't argue. She didn't ask me to reconsider. She stood up from the table and went to the bedroom, and I sat in the kitchen and listened to the sounds of her packing, which were quiet and efficient, which told me she'd known this was coming and had been preparing herself for it in some private way for a while. She came out with a bag, not everything she'd brought, but enough to leave. She stopped in the kitchen doorway. She said my name, not to start a sentence, not as a lead-in to anything, just as a thing she needed to say once more. Then she left. I heard the front door close. I heard the elevator at the end of the hall. Then the building was quiet in the way it was quiet on Sunday mornings before she'd been in it, and I sat at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and didn't move for a long time. The ceramic dish is still by the stove. I've moved it twice and put it back both times without being able to explain why. The photograph came down from the refrigerator the day after she left, but I know where it is. I put it in the kitchen drawer with the spare batteries and the takeout menus, face down, and I haven't thrown it away. Stanton asked me last week how Delia was doing. I told him we weren't together anymore and watched his face move through something that looked like genuine surprise and sympathy. He said he was sorry, that he'd always thought we were solid, that it was hard to picture us not being together after all this time. I thanked him and changed the subject. My mother called on Thursday. She asked about Delia in the careful way she asks about things she suspects have gone wrong. I told her the same thing I told Stanton. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said she'd always liked her, that she hoped I was taking care of myself. I told her I was. The memories are still there in everyone around me. I don't know if they'll fade or if they're permanent. I don't know enough about how any of it works to make a reasonable guess. What I know is that right now, in this moment, every person in my life remembers a 10-year marriage that I only remember as 5 weeks and 4 dinners and a parking lot conversation about screw anchors. I am completely alone in what is true. I've been thinking about whether that's the better position or the worse one. Whether it's better to have the real memory and the real loss, the clean, accurate account of what actually happened, or to have the warm, false one, the decade of mornings and photographs and a grief that at least had something real to hold. I don't have an answer. I'm not sure the question has one. What I have is a Sunday morning and 2 cups of coffee and a ceramic dish by the stove that I keep putting back, and outside the window the city is going about its business the way it always does, and somewhere in it, or somewhere else entirely, there is a woman who loved her husband for 10 years and lost him, and then lost him again, and I think about that more than I probably should. I hope she found somewhere to land. I genuinely do.